Hi there, and in today's video I'm going to show you how fluorescent tubes work. So I'm Darren and I'm your host and you're watching Darren DIY. And now, without any further ado, grab a drink or something to eat and I hope you will enjoy. So for those of you who might not know, this is a fluorescent tube. And the circuit needed for this to light up consists of two other parts, which are a ballast and a starter. So let's see how does this work. So as you can see, this is the tube itself. And let me tell you what it consists of. So as you can see, this tube is split up so that I can explain to you better. So as you can see, at the end there are two filaments. In the tube itself, there is a mixture of mercury vapor and a noble gas. When this is lighting up, there are also electrons hitting the mercury vapor, but I'll get into that a bit later. So how does this tube actually function? Now I'll tell you how it works with all the circuit a little bit later, but let's see what happens inside the tube itself. So first the elements heat up a bit, so that the electrons can fly a bit better off of the filament. After the electrons leave off the filament, they pump into the mercury atoms, which excites the atoms in the mercury atom itself and puts it in a higher state. Since this higher state of the mercury is unstable, it quickly goes down to the lower state that it was before, and in this process it emits ultraviolet rays, which then hit the phosphor coating onto the tube itself, which is this white coating, as you can see. As you can see, here is the coating, and here there isn't. These ultraviolet rays hits the coating, and then which the phosphor absorbs them and emits visible rays instead of the harmful ultraviolet rays, which also in this process the phosphor coating heats up a little bit. The function of the noble gas in the tube, which is very usually argon gas, is so that a plasma can be formed, so that the electrons can keep hitting the mercury atoms and get them excited, so that they will emit ultraviolet rays, so that they can emit light. A good thing to know is that the pressure in the tube is actually 0.3 atmospheres, or also you can say that it is 0.3 of the atmosphere. But how does the actual circuit work? Because you don't just connect the AC lines to the tube. Before I'll explain that to you, you need to know what these items are. So as you can see, I have two starters, which are also known as a gas discharge lamp. So as you can see, here we have a used one, and here we have a relatively new one. So as you can see, here is a capacitor, which I haven't actually found a lot about it, but I think that it smooths the current or something. So as you can see, here we have two discharge lamps. As you can see, this one is used and it has the metal onto the sides of the glass, and here is a new one. So if you look closely, there are two pieces of metal here. When the current starts flowing through the circuit at first, since there is a noble gas inside this tube, which is usually neon or argon, an arc strikes between the 2 points. When the arc strikes, the two metal strips heat up, which causes them to go together like this, so that they make a contact and close the circuit, so that current can keep flowing. But when this happens, as the strips cool down, from this they reopen the circuit and restrike an arc. Also, this cycle keeps going on like this until the tube lights up. You can see this as the starter flickers at first. Now as you can see, over time, some of the metal from the strips will vaporize and go on and cling on to the glass, as when the arc strikes, some of that metal gets vaporized. Now let's see what is a ballast. A ballast is nothing more than just an inductor. An inductor is just a coil of wire like this. But in the ballast, it is wrapped around a metal piece, so that the inductor can hold more charge in it. So what is the function of this inductor? The function of it is so that it could hold a magnetic field in it, so that when the current stops flowing, the magnetic field collapses, and so it will produce a high voltage spike, which will enable the electrons to hit the mercury atoms, so that they emit the ultraviolet rays, and so on. Also, the function of this inductor is so that it limits the current that passes through the fluorescent lamp, or else the fluorescent lamp will probably burn out. So let's wrap things up and see how it actually works. So first, the AC voltage goes through here, through the inductor, through the filament, and goes to the starter. Then the starter strikes an arc and the circuit will be closed. Now, since the circuit is closed, the inductor gets charged with the magnetic field. After some time has passed, the electrodes on the starter cool down and pass away from each other like this, so that they reopen the circuit. After that, the magnetic field in the ballast collapses and produces a high voltage spike, which then it enables the electrons to start, you can say, reacting with the mercury, so that they will produce an ultraviolet light, which will hit the phosphor coating on the tubes, and then the phosphor coating transforms the ultraviolet rays into visible light rays, and in the way producing a little heat on the phosphor. In order for the fluorescent light to turn on, the starter has to open and close the switch a couple of times, and you can actually see this when you turn on a fluorescent light. You see the starter flicker a couple of times before the fluorescent light turns on. This is because so that the filaments heat up a bit. Because as we said earlier, as the switch is closed for a fraction of a second, the filaments heat up a bit, as I said earlier, so that the electrons could be emitted a little bit better, so that they are more excited to hit the mercury vapor. After that the fluorescent light had finally turned on, the starter doesn't keep on flickering, because as I said earlier, the ballast acts as a current limiter, and so, since the current is limited, the voltage will be a bit less. For example, if the AC input is 220 volts, it will be maybe around 100 volts also, or 120. And so there isn't enough voltage to strike an arc here, at the starter, and so it will not keep flickering. Also, after the light is on, the city power lines is enough to keep the electrons going, as the filaments are heated up. Also, as I said earlier with the starters, in the tubes the same thing happens. As you can see, some of the metal from the filament gets deposited onto the glass, and so after time the filament will burn out. Also, as you can see, here's what a burned filament looks like. Also, a really cool fact is that when you turn these lights off, since the atoms in the phosphor coating are excited, the phosphor actually emits some light as you turn the light off. You can see this as soon as you turn off a fluorescent light. In some cases the color is green, and in some others it is orange. The color that the phosphor emits at last actually depends from the phosphor that the manufacturers put into the tubes. As you can see, here is the flickering that I told you about earlier. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video of me teaching you how a fluorescent tube turns on. So if you enjoyed it and moreover learned something new, please tell me down below. And don't forget to subscribe so that you won't miss any new videos like this one or any new DIY videos. So if you haven't already, go and subscribe. I'm sure that you won't regret it. So if you did like this video, make sure to drop a like down below. It actually really helps me and motivates me to make new videos. So as always guys, make sure to stay safe and always have fun. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.